The People's Progressive Party, Civic, continues to attempt to fool the Guyanese people by telling them that jobs will be lost as a result of 2012 budget cuts by the majority parliamentary opposition. And what's worst is that they have now used the ordinary workers to promote their lies and wicked propaganda. Do you remember this Government Information Agency GINA propaganda aired on the National Communications Network NCN on the last week in April of this year?
First place, I am the sole breadwinner for my family. I have 3 persons at home depending on me, and I don't...
Ridiculous, because these are the same 2 parties who stood at their campaign platform and fight for job creation, and this is the same 2 party that send home workers.
Now, those were only 2 of the many workers from the Government Information Agency GINA who had bitterly complained about the opposition's budget cuts to the point of prepared tears. It is clear that that recording was staged. Now here's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Those workers were either forced to lie, were threatened to lie, or were in cahoots with government to maliciously deceive our citizens. Now, this next video clip reveals those same 2 workers. It was recorded on Thursday, 10th May 2012, during the 20th sitting of the National Assembly of the 10th Parliament. It is clear that these 2 workers are on the job carrying out normal duties. Translation: they helped the government and the big boys at GINA to lie to this nation. Additionally, GINA and NCN continue to run advertisements condemning the opposition for putting 30 GINA staffers out of work. But images currently on screen are those out of GINA. It is only fair to ask the question, who is currently working and producing at NCN and GINA? Have ghosts now taken up these positions and posts?
That is lie. Lie? You hear lie? Teacher Percy say if you tell a lie, you're going to hell as soon as you die.
Do not misinterpret this piece. It is good to know that these misguided and misled workers are still on the job at GINA. But the lesson in all this is, do not allow yourselves to be used by the devil.
Lying to me, that is all you do.
Now, once again, here's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Now, we campaigned in 2011 about transparency. We said to the people of Guyana, if this country is properly run, if we can not necessarily remove, because in every country there's some amount of corruption, if we can bring it under control, we can have a better life for Guyana. But the PPP, true to form, some cuts were made, and Val, I'm going to ask you to remind people of the cuts and to explain to them why we did those, why we proposed those cuts, and use our majority as we're entitled to do, as the government has done for 19 years. Val, you and I have been in Parliament. Carl was spared it for a long while, where they would say things like, well, you can have your say, we will have our way, because we have the majority of what they used to say that. Now all of a sudden you hear about a dictatorship of one and all of that. But Valda, there were some cuts that were done. Share with the Guyanese public the rationale for some of the cuts that we made.
Yeah, in NCN, you would have heard Mr. Sattar, the CEO, writing a letter to Mr. Kemaraj Ramjatan just in March of this year, indicating to him that 90% of their revenues garnered are from advertisement and other works which they provide. And hence the subsidy which they get from the government's coffer is merely at 10%. I think I want Carl to go a little deep into this one here.
Yeah. Well, if you have total revenues of that size, compared to a subsidy of 60 million, it doesn't follow that if that 60 million is available, you need to go laying off staff left, right, and center. Let me just remind you that the government, was it in 2009 or whenever, decided to cut all the advertisements going to the private agencies that deliver news. I am not aware that any of them undertook wide-scale laying off of staff or even minimal laying off of staff. What they did is adjust their programs so that they could find other avenues to raise monies. That is, you have your advertising drive become more intensive, okay, and you try to be more innovative. There is no reason why NCN cannot do that. But the problem of NCN and Gina is a more fundamental one. Do we, as parliamentarians, vote monies for an entity which uses those monies to attack us, to simply support one element within the parliament? We are calling upon taxpayers to pay their taxes. We make those decisions. We approve bills for the raising of taxes. But at no point did we ever set out to raise taxes simply to facilitate the work of Freedom House. Taxes aren't raised to do the business of Freedom House. They are raised to do the business of the country. And for as long as NCN and Gina don't understand, the management doesn't understand that they have a responsibility to the public and to standards of reporting, then you have a problem. It is also the case, and I make this point also, that if you are working for a public entity and a minister or an agent of the political party in government requires you to do something personal or professional which is not in keeping with the rules, and you agree to do it, then you put yourself at risk. You can't blame the law, if you like, or the regulations for hauling you over the coals for doing what is in effect illegal. The Constitution and the articles of NCN and Gina require them to adhere to acceptable standards, and they're not doing that.
Fellow Guyanese, the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration has been speaking to itself for 20 years. It is now angry that the majority of members of the National Assembly have dared to talk back. It is now astounded that members of the public have dared to disagree with its diktat. It is now astonished that the people of Guyana, through their elected representatives, have demanded fundamental changes to the national budget. It can no longer expect that its proposed budget could pass without amendment, without correction. It no longer pretends that its budget can pass without the consultation of the majority of people in the National Assembly and outside of the National Assembly. This budget, fellow Guyanese, if left unchanged, will have catastrophic consequences, not only to present-day Guyanese, but to generations to come. The People's Progressive Party, fellow Guyanese, also fail to understand that Guyanese citizens feel deprived and discriminated against because of the failure to enforce the constitutional right to freedom of expression and freedom to receive and transmit ideas, freedom to communicate, which is guaranteed to them under the Constitution. Never again must Guyanese citizens be prevented from listening to the radio station of their choice, from viewing television programs of their choice. Why is it that we must be subjected day after day to the pap that comes from the Government Information Agency or the National Communication Network? The opposition instantly realized that the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration's budget had made a big mistake. It was clear that the proposed budget was out of touch with reality. It was out of touch with the actual needs of the Guyanese people, and that they had to be changed. It refused to restructure the Government Information Agency and the National Communication Network in order to make them more responsive and more responsible information agencies.
do.